Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Big Ten Talk. I'm here tonight with Connor Morrissette, who is a senior writer for USC football. Did I get that right?
Yeah, USCfootball.com. You got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with me here tonight, Connor. I would love if you kind of just took maybe a minute or two to tell us a little bit about what you do, how long you've been doing it, how you got into it, and kind of just a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I cover USC for USCfootball.com, which can be confusing. Some people think it's affiliated with a school, but it's part of the 24/7 Sports Network. This is my third season. Before that, I was working under the Sports Illustrated umbrella covering USC from like January to the summer of 2023 before making the jump over here. Prior to that, I did high school sports out here in LA. Grew up on the East Coast, went to school in New York, and then after I graduated, I moved out here to cover high school sports in the LA area. And yeah, I've just been climbing the ladder. And for USC, mainly do writing, but some podcasting, video work, go to the practices, cover all the games. So got back from Notre Dame earlier today. Tough loss for USC. But yeah, try to just be the best resource I can for USC fans. Anything that's going on with USC that I think is newsworthy for the football, men's basketball, women's basketball teams, I'll try my best to either write a story or get a tweet out or a board post. So, yeah, that's about the extent of it.
That's awesome. It's super interesting how you made such a jump from the East Coast to the West Coast. I always hear people talking about what a transition that is. And it sounds like you have acclimated well and you've been here for a while, but it's still to grow up on the East Coast and even go to school out there to kind of make that shift probably was quite an adjustment.
I'm lucky I moved out here with some college friends, so I had a
Okay.
good support network. And yeah, still really close with all those people. So, yeah, definitely a change of pace, but it's nice to have that support system.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's like your favorite thing about covering USC or about your current position? Like what's your favorite thing about your job?
Going to the road games is awesome. And just the fact that I try to just be at everything I can, and like I was saying
Yeah.
earlier, just being that resource. I don't want people to think like, "Oh, I should read this guy's stuff because he covers USC." I wanna show people like, "Okay, this guy's worth following and reading because he knows what he's doing and he's at all the events and just has a good understanding of kinda the scope of situations and expectations and all that good stuff." So, try to just work as hard as I can and be at all the events, and that is a big part of it. And yeah, it's nice to go to all these away games. My boss Ryan pays for that, which is great, obviously. So uh, not every reporter is fortunate enough to have that. So that's a big piece of it too. But just being on the scene for as much as I can, that's probably how I'd sum it up best.
Yeah, I imagine that's super exciting. And during your time in this position, do you have like a favorite game you have attended? A favorite away game, I should say.
Unfortunately, USC's had a tough couple years here on the road. For me personally, the Notre Dame game 2 years
Yeah.
ago, it was a tough one for USC, but it was my dad's 60th birthday, and he flew out, and my mom and sister did as well. So we had some nice family time. So that was nice. USC didn't get the win, unfortunately, but it was still nice to be at that one. At Cal a couple years ago, I got to see some family. So I guess for personal reasons, but in terms
Yeah.
of the best USC road win, Purdue this year was good. The first
Yeah.
true Big Ten road win. There haven't been a lot of great memories though, unfortunately, just for USC. But for me personally, I've been fortunate to have some.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, for you personally, that totally works. That's a great answer. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about USC, not necessarily just yesterday's game, but kind of overall this season. I know I spoke a couple weeks ago, maybe 3, 4 weeks ago now, actually, about the explosiveness on offense and how fun that has been to see and to watch. So I would love to get your perspective, kind of how you have seen this team look throughout the first 8 weeks of the season. Maybe some concerns you have, maybe some things that are really exciting to you, or things that you feel good about with this team overall. Kind of just your overall thoughts on this particular team this season.
Sure. So USC's had one bye, so through 8 weeks they're 5-2. And the big question I had going into the year was, will the offense be able to rebound after a disappointing last season? And even though there have been some disappointing moments, they've rebounded really well if you look at Bill Connolly on ESPN, his SP Plus ratings, which are
Yeah.
really good, USC has the best offense in the country. So can't rebound any better than that. Jade Mayava has, for the most part, been really good this year. Threw 2 picks against Notre Dame. One was in garbage time. So that was a little bit disappointing to see, but all the questions that we had about him for the most part have been answered. He's not losing fumbles like he did last season. The interceptions are way down. He's just looked night and day better from where he was last season, a lot more consistent. So he's certainly answered the bell and been good. USC has some injuries at the running back spot. So against Notre Dame, they struggled to run the ball. But before that, Wayman Jordan, a junior college transfer, I think he was second in the Big Ten in yards per carry. So the running game had come along really well. And then Mekhi Lemon has been an exceptional receiver for USC. I keep going back to this. Didn't have the best game against Notre Dame, but before that, he was Pro Football Focus's highest graded receiver through the first 6 weeks. He's been awesome. So the offense has rebounded, which has been great. Defensively, USC's had some nice moments, especially in that Michigan game from a couple weeks back where they really put together a full game, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, and played well. Had one big explosive play in the secondary that occurred, but outside of that, it was good. But overall this year, the defense has not been as good as I thought, and that's been a problem. I thought under Danton Lynn in his second year, USC would take a step forward. In some areas they have, but the floor is not as high as I would have thought, where USC goes to Illinois and Kamari Ramsey doesn't play, but the defense was really bad in that game. And Luke Altmaier was able to drive Illinois down at the end and set up a field goal that I think David Alano was the kicker's name made, and USC lost the game that they should have won. And then against Notre Dame, they just allowed 306 rushing yards to the Irish. And Jeremiah Love, their great running back, had a career high. He's in his third year.
Yeah.
Against Illinois, Altmaier had a career high in quarterback rating. So this defense that should be getting better is having a tough time on the road and still allowing career highs to opponents, where that was the case under the previous defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch. I thought that USC would move away from that, but for whatever reason, they've had a tough time playing good teams on the road this year defensively. And that is probably the biggest story of the season, because if your offense is the best in the country, and if the defense was just average in some of these games, USC would have a chance to be undefeated right now.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. And kind of looking at the remaining games they have on their schedule, what concerns you the most, and how do you see them wrapping up the regular season?
So the big one's at Oregon here in November. But before that, USC, they have a bye this week, and then they go to Nebraska. So I'm looking at the road games. I think USC has a great chance to win the rest of their home games. UCLA all of a sudden looks better, and the team that has been the away team, even though they're both from LA, has won like the last 3 or 4, or maybe even more than that, games in the series. So that's been something that's kind of weird. But I do think USC should win out at home. They got Iowa, Northwestern, UCLA, maybe someone else I'm forgetting, but all winnable games. And then the road games are going to determine if this season is a success the rest of the way, or what we expected, or not as good as we thought. And I look at that Nebraska one coming up. That is going to be a challenge, even though Nebraska, they've not looked as good the past couple of weeks. USC's just been so bad on the road that it's hard to say definitively, oh, they'll definitely win. And then the Oregon game is challenging. So say USC is able to win every one, but the Oregon game, that's probably the most likely loss right now. And they end 9-3. Yes, they lost games against ranked teams on the road, which is frustrating, but a 9-3 year after going 6-6, you take that every day of the week. That's a clear sign of progress. You can, even though there have been some disappointing moments, see what Lincoln Riley's building. And I think that's a great year. I picked them to go 8-4 before the season, so that would be better than I thought. If they win out, college football playoff potentially, I don't see that, but that's still in play if they only have the 2 losses. And if they go 8-4, maybe they lose a game I don't expect. That's still better than last year. And there would be some frustration, but USC has the number 1 class in 2026. I think the fact that they beat Michigan 2 weeks ago, even if the rest of the year is disappointing, and let's say they go 8-4 for argument's sake, that Michigan game, Lincoln Riley can point to that and say, hey, we got the job done this week. I'm building something. Just give me some more time. If they had lost that one and say they were to go 7-5, lose to Michigan, Nebraska, Oregon, then it's like, oh, is this the right guy for the job? I don't really know. So it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. I'd be surprised if after beating Michigan, unless the bottom totally falls out, which I don't anticipate, a coaching change occurring. So I think Riley will be back next year. The team is better than they were last year. They've shown progress, even if it's not quite as good as some people were hoping at the beginning of the year. That progress should be enough to keep this regime here and to have people excited about next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned it, but UCLA obviously has had some recent success, which has been incredibly wild and partly entertaining to watch and see. Do you kind of see that feeling like more of a rivalry game this season than it has the past few years?
It always feels like a rivalry just because they're the two teams in LA. But at the beginning of the year, it looked like UCLA might go 0-12. So I did
Yeah.
not see how that was going to be competitive. But now here, I think they've won 3 games in a row. So
Yeah.
clearly they're doing something right. And that game, even if UCLA was 0-11 heading into it, like unless they had just totally given up, which maybe they would have if they were 0-11, like that always means something. And I think they would have given USC a good effort. But now that they have this interim coach who looks like he's doing a nice job, and Jerry Neuheisel calling the offensive plays, that game certainly could be challenging for USC, at least more than we thought. So yeah, that's an intriguing one where a couple of weeks ago I wasn't sure how intriguing that game was going to be. And we'll see just where USC is at heading into that game, because that could be a really important one if USC goes on and surprises some people here the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you. 4 weeks ago, I was kind of assuming that UCLA wouldn't win a game this season. And I definitely at that time would not have picked them to beat Penn State of all the teams on their schedule. So it's been wild to see. And kind of, I watched a little bit of their game yesterday against Maryland, and they definitely just seem to have better cohesion. So it's interesting that this interim coach has managed to have that success just in a few short weeks, which is it's awesome from like an outside perspective. It's entertaining and it's good overall for the entertainment factor of the conference. But yeah, that's definitely one that I'm excited to kind of watch. I always like to pay attention to the West Coast teams, so seeing how UCLA and USC are doing is kind of something I try to keep up with, but that will definitely be a game that I tune into and I think will be hopefully an exciting one.
Yeah, I think it will be. It's amazing how UCLA hasn't had anyone leave the program since
Yeah.
this coaching change occurred. So the buy-in has been amazing, and it just goes to show if you have the wrong person in charge and then you get someone else, like it can really make a big change. We always talk about, oh, the recruiting is the most important, and obviously that is important, but if you don't have the right coach and then you make a change and the coach gets better, he can do a lot even with a roster that doesn't have as much talent as some other teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So something I like to ask the people that I bring onto this show, especially because this is kind of a consistent discussion topic, is realignment. So you have been covering the team for a few years. What were your initial thoughts on USC making the jump from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten?
I thought they had to do it. The Pac-12 looked like a sinking ship to me. USC going and getting the full revenue share from the Big Ten Conference was huge. The fact that Oregon and Washington don't have that for a few years is significant, even though Oregon, of course, money sometimes isn't as important to them when they have a big booster charge. But yeah, I just felt like the Pac-12 was not in a good spot, and it's all about money, as we've seen with this Big Ten private equity situation. USC needed to go out and get the best deal it possibly could. It's a shame that it sunk the Pac-12, but a lot of people blame USC and UCLA for the Pac-12's demise. The Pac-12 shot itself in the foot. They could have added Texas and Oklahoma and been a real competitor to the Big Ten and the SEC, but that, of course, didn't happen. And there were moves that they could have made that they didn't. USC got ahead of it, did what they needed to do along with UCLA, and I'm happy that they made the jump because you want to be in one of the big two leagues. So that's been
Yeah.
great. The financial piece is huge. It was the right move, even though I understand the criticisms too.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. And obviously this topic is kind of something that still gets tossed around. So are you thinking that eventually other teams will leave their conferences to join the Big Ten?
It's an interesting question. I'm not totally sure what will happen because we hear about a potential super league. That's a
Right.
rumor. And then in this private equity deal, the teams or the programs, the schools would sign the granted rights to like 2046, which would lock them in the Big Ten for a really long time. And
Right.
potentially, if the ACC crumbles, then there would be some appealing schools. If Notre Dame were to ever join a conference, I don't see that happening. The Big Ten would make a lot of sense. So I don't think any school in the Big 12 would be of interest to the Big Ten. I think it's really only if ACC school leaves or if that league crumbles, could someone else get added. But it's fascinating. I don't really know what the future looks like because it seems like the rules change every day and
Yeah.
stuff is crazy. But if the ACC were to go under, then I could see that being the next domino falling. And then there's also the thought of a super league, and I think USC would be in a position where they'd want to join that. But what does that look like, and how does that affect other sports? It's very messy going down that road. So yeah, the Big
It is.
Ten could potentially add someone else, but I don't see that happening in the near future. I don't think.
Right. It is incredibly messy. But you do make a good point. The ACC kind of crumbling is the next domino, at least in terms of the discussions that people like to have. And what schools from the ACC do you think would make the most sense in the Big Ten?
North Carolina, that brand would make a lot of sense. They just, I think, have the biggest brand. I know Duke is there too, but just based on the realignment reading I've done, it's been a while, but I think North Carolina has a lot of cachet, and that would be of interest to the Big Ten. And then I don't know what it would look like with the Florida schools, Florida State, Miami.
Hmm.
They're right in SEC country. I thought I saw something like the SEC would take Miami potentially, but not Florida State. So I don't know if Florida State would be appealing to the Big Ten. That would be something to pay attention to. And outside of that, am I forgetting anyone obvious? Like, there's just a lot of teams where I don't think the Big Ten would be interested. Like my alma mater, Syracuse, I don't think would get the call. I don't think Boston College would get the call, or Wake Forest,
Right.
or
Yeah.
Georgia Tech. Oh, Clemson's the other one.
Clemson. Yeah.
They would, I imagine, make a move to the SEC because they're
Yeah.
right in SEC country. But not that North Carolina isn't, but that one, it was very alluring to the Big Ten, it sounds like to me. And I imagine they'd be a package deal with Duke, I think, kind of like UCLA
Right.
and USC. So I'm not totally as well versed as others on that, but I think the premier programs in the ACC could bring value to the conference. And then there's some others that wouldn't, but those ones that I mentioned have the most value.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think about basketball, you could get some really good brands with the ACC. Like you mentioned Duke and you mentioned UNC. I know Virginia has come up in a few like articles that I have read about making the
Yeah,
move to the Big Ten. And
that's
so
another
it's
good one.
really, yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm with you. I think Clemson would go to the SEC. Miami and the SEC also makes sense. But it's fascinating. I'm kind of at that point where like I don't love the idea of other schools joining, and that's pure selfishness now that the four of us have made the move from the Pac 12 to the Big Ten. And 18 teams just already seems like so many. But it's fascinating to see how the conference could elevate in regard to these big, especially these big basketball brands joining. But you're right. It's like this ongoing conversation that we really don't know because the rules are constantly changing and narratives are constantly shifting. And who knows what it's going to look like even like in a decade, but obviously very money driven. I'm with you. I think the Pac 12 really shot themselves in the foot, and obviously four schools leaving and jumping ship, and even the ones who left for the Big 12, that was a good move for the sake and of the health and longevity of their programs.
Certainly. And you feel bad for Washington State and Oregon State, the two that got left behind. I remember Arizona was kind of on the fence. It was like, oh, should we join the
Right.
Big 12? What should we do? And they had to join the Big 12. If they hadn't have done that, that would have been a suicidal move potentially, or at least shooting themselves in
Exactly.
the foot. Yeah, they needed that. So uh, it was crappy to see that all transpire, but I was happy that Arizona made that right choice because just following along on that fateful day when everything happened, I remember some Arizona reporters were like, oh, they might back out of this, and that would have thrown a wrench
Yeah.
in everything. But that was clearly the best move for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of thinking about how the Big Ten conference looks this season, When you think about the regular season, who do you have ending up in the conference championship this year? If you have a prediction so far. If you don't, that's okay. But like maybe some teams that have impressed you and who you might have like a gut feeling or an instinct of who might end up in the conference championship based on what we know in week 8 of college football.
I don't think Ohio State and Indiana play each other, so right now
Yeah.
it's hard to look past those two teams. So yeah, those would be my picks right now, especially after Indiana beat Oregon. Oregon looks like the third team in the conference to me right now. If they were to play Ohio State, that would be a hell of a game. So there's certainly a lot of talent at the top, and then that fourth team for a couple weeks was it USC? Was it
Right.
Washington, Michigan? It looks like Illinois has an inside track to being number 4 right now with how their schedule sets up. But so to answer your original question, I think Ohio State and Indiana right now, but there's still a lot of football left to be played, of course.
Yeah, and you kind of answered my follow-up question with that as well. It's kind of like what rounds out like the top 4, top 5 teams for you. And I agree. I think Illinois should be up there. And you're right. For a few weeks it was USC because of that explosive offense and how you guys like were just dominating your opponents the first few weeks of the season. So yeah, I totally agree. And this like kind of like a fun question. We get to ask these fun questions now that we're in the Big Ten and we have like all these other teams at our fingertips. But Ohio State and Michigan's obviously one of the best college football rivalries in college football. Do you think that Ohio State finally beats Michigan this year?
I don't see how they don't. Except for the fact that it's at Michigan, so maybe
Right.
that will throw a wrench in it. But I just think if USC was able to handle Michigan, then I imagine Ohio State would. But it seems like there's some voodoo in that rivalry right now where
Right.
Michigan has the leg up. But even though it's at the Big House, I'd have a hard time seeing Bryce Underwood beat that defense as a true freshman. So, yeah, I don't know. But hey, they won last year at Ohio State when they couldn't throw the ball. So anything can happen. But I would pick Ohio State, I think, right now. Matt Patricia has that defense playing exceptionally well. So,
It's
uh,
incredible.
yeah, so I think there's always a chance that Michigan could win, of course. But Ohio State looks pretty tough to beat right now.
Yes, they do seem really tough to beat for their defense alone. Not that they
Yeah.
haven't been impressive offensively as well, but for their defense alone, absolutely. It seems really hard to beat. I'm with you. I think Ohio State does beat them, but anything can happen in a rivalry game. That has been obvious these last couple of years with Ohio State, especially last year. I don't think anyone saw that coming. But it's definitely super fun to be part of a conference that has one of the best college football rivalries in it. I'm going to pop this question up just because it's SC related. What do you think the chances SC wins out the rest of the way?
Low. I just think that Michigan game is hard, or excuse me, that Oregon game is hard, where USC has just really stunk on the road against ranked teams this year. Oregon will be ranked. We all know how Dan Lanning will approach that game because of the recruiting battles that happen, and he just really loves beating USC. So it would be great to see USC get a win there. Off the top of my head, don't remember the last time that's happened. I think it's been a little bit. So that's the one game that really trips me up when I get that question. But the rest of them are certainly winnable for USC, and 9-3 is absolutely on the table, even after this disappointing defeat to Notre Dame. But if I were to give a like percentage, I'd say 5 to 10. I just don't see him winning at Oregon. That's a tough one.
And kind of going back to the Notre Dame game really quick, what did not go USC's way? Like I was able to catch the fourth quarter of that game. And I kept track of like the score on my phone here and there. But what do you think was the downfall in regard of USC not being able to pull off the win? Was it all defense?
Well, they couldn't stop the run, first and foremost. They gave up 315 sack adjusted rushing yards, which was not good. Jeremiah Love, I think, had 228, which just crazy, which was a career high. So that was a problem. But like USC took a 24-21 lead in the third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next play, Jadarian Price, Notre Dame's other really good running back, had a 100-yard kick return for a touchdown. So every time USC would get a little momentum, Notre Dame would answer right back. USC scored on their first drive, the opening drive of the game, a touchdown, and then Jadarian Price had a 63-yard run on Notre Dame's first drive that set up a 12-yard touchdown from him. So USC really struggled to separate, and they had 3 turnovers. Notre Dame just had the 1, so that was another key part of it. But the run defense and then not being able to take advantage of Notre Dame's mistakes, I think, was another big piece where Notre Dame had a bunch of penalties, 8 for 96 yards. They missed a short field goal, missed an extra point, kept kicking the ball out of bounds. I thought they could have run the ball more, and they didn't. They wanted to force CJ Carr down USC's throat for some reason. So it was certainly a winnable one for USC, but at the end of it, they couldn't stop the run. And when the game was on the line, they turned it over too much at the end.
Yeah. I hope that's a rivalry that never goes away, because it is such a fun game with such a good history that is always one that people, especially college football fans, kind of look forward to and kind of keep their eye on every single season. So hopefully it's not something that goes away anytime soon, if ever.
I'm with you. And right now, the big debate, USC wants to play the game every year earlier in the year, or at
Right.
least the trip to South Bend. If they do that, either play it at a neutral field or play the road game earlier in the year. And Notre Dame just wants it to stay the way it has stayed. So I get both sides of the argument. A big part of USC's argument for not extending it long term earlier in the year was the fact that the SEC wasn't playing 9 conference games, but they switched and now they are in the future. And then the SEC even added a 10th game against a Power 4 opponent. So I know a lot of those teams aren't playing a team like Notre Dame, so I get when USC fans say it's not
Yeah.
the same, but it's close enough to me where I would just want them to keep it, and a lot of USC fans feel differently. But to me, when the SEC makes that change and the Big Ten, they're going to, I think, require teams moving forward. At some point, I would imagine they'd want Indiana to get rid of the 3 crappy non-conference teams that they play. I hope they follow suit and like the SEC and say, hey, play another play another Power 4 team like USC does
Right.
with Notre Dame. I hope that happens. If that happens, then I think USC should absolutely keep it the same. I get how there are some little differences though, and why they're negotiating. If it was up to me, I'd just keep it the same though.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always such a fun game, and it's a great one with great history. So hopefully it does stay. So kind of just looking over, because I'm going to go over like who won, who lost, and then I have a couple follow-up questions for you. It's okay if you were traveling, obviously. So I don't imagine you sat and watched every single Big Ten game, but kind of just to get some perspective. So Michigan beat Washington this weekend 24-7. Northwestern beat Purdue 19-0, which is another team that has been looking really well in these recent weeks, is Northwestern, because for a short bit there as well, I wasn't sure they'd win more than one game, just taking a look at their schedule. But that's been fun. Ohio State beat Wisconsin 34-0. Indiana got the win over Michigan State 38-13. UCLA obviously won, like we talked about. They beat Maryland 20-17. Iowa just edged out Penn State 25-24. Notre Dame won obviously 34-24, and Oregon beat Rutgers 56-10. So all of the teams that were favored ended up winning this weekend. And kind of taking a look at the conference, and I want to say not to include Penn State in your answer, but you can if that's just genuinely your answer. But what would you say are like the top maybe 2-3 teams that have disappointed you the most? Like maybe you had higher hopes for them, or you thought they would look stronger or more dominant and they just haven't. Do you have like a couple of schools that kind of stick out to you?
Penn State has to be number 1, so I
Okay.
won't go into depth with them. But yeah, they're at the top of the list. I thought that Purdue would be a little better, which I know is
Yeah,
weird to say with Barry Odom coming in and them having so many
right.
transfers, but like I thought they gave USC a pretty good game and would maybe be able to build on that a little bit, but it just hasn't happened. And then they got shut out against Northwestern, which was a surprise. So they would
Yeah.
make my list. UCLA would have made my list, but all of a sudden they're coming back to life here. I think the other one has to be Michigan State, where I didn't really have the highest hopes for them, but they have just totally crumbled. And I thought they could have been like a 6-6 team and maybe a tough out here and there, but they've just kind of laid down, especially against UCLA. So they're on my list too. Those are probably the big 3 off the top of my head. I think that's about it because everyone else has had some nice wins or been a little
Yeah,
inconsistent. But yeah, I mean, Penn State first and foremost,
of
they're
course.
the big one, and Nebraska's been kind of disappointing to me too. But I didn't really buy the Nebraska hype, so I'm not totally surprised about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't necessarily buy that hype. So this isn't totally surprising. It's hard to say Penn State's not the most surprising. I mean, there are so many different storylines in the offseason about them winning the Big Ten and getting to the national championship, possibly winning the national championship with that veteran roster. And so the fact that we look at them and where they're at now, that's just like quite the fall from grace, which is can be it's just super surprising when you think about all of the storylines just 9 weeks ago.
Yeah,
But also
preseason number
Michigan's
one.
exactly. Yes, it's just life hits you fast. But also Michigan State, I totally agree. That one kind of goes under the radar a little bit, but it's come to the surface very obviously these last couple of weeks just because of the way they've managed to crumble. And I actually thought Jonathan Smith, we would see a jump in terms of his team this season and overall that like cohesion and how they would be able to pull off some wins that they just really haven't gotten to that point. And I know fans are incredibly frustrated because they obviously expected that level of development as well. But yeah, it's quite surprising how little development they have made.
They had a nice win over Boston College, but as time has gone on, Boston College stinks. So the fact
Right.
that that game went to overtime at Michigan State, even though Michigan State won, was probably more of a sign of bad things to come. And yeah, I don't think they've won a game in the conference. UCLA pushed them around. I talked to someone yesterday at the Notre Dame game who's plugged in who made it sound like Jonathan Smith could be fired, and he
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if it happened even during the year. So if they don't turn things around quickly or at least just get a win here, he could be in some trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and another kind of like fun question. I hear this from opposing fan bases all the time, Oregon included, but people have the same complaints about Oregon, is like the USC fan base on social media can be really rowdy, also really entertaining and really crazy. Do you have like do they ever come at you? Like, do you have like crazy experiences with your own fan base? Or are they generally pretty mild with the media who cover them? Because I know for like Oregon fans, they can get a little bit crazy with the media who cover them. But do they get crazy with you?
I'd say it's overwhelmingly good for me,
Okay, that's good.
but I try to speak my mind, and I've definitely gone back and forth with people. So I think that's just kind of par for the course. But for the most part, especially when you meet someone who you interact with online in person,
Yeah, it's always different.
99.9% of my in-person interactions are amazing. And the people who I meet who are online and then I meet them in person are so nice. So that's great. It's the anonymous people who hide behind the
Right.
logo or,
Yeah.
whatever, who can give you a hard time. And, you know, that's something that as time goes on, I like to think I do a better job of, but part of this job is reading what people have to say, especially on the message boards. And a lot of that can be anonymous, of course. So it's a tightrope that you have to walk because people can be rude and it can be upsetting, but it's also part of the job sometimes to see what people have to say. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely get the question. And for the most part, it's been good, but here and there, always some people who we don't always see eye to eye, let's say.
Yeah, and fans can have a problem with that objectivity and kind of like the realistic approach and people sharing their opinions that don't necessarily match their narratives. But I see it a lot with USC from like an outside perspective again. So I always find it interesting. But I've had great interactions with some, not so great interactions with others. That's just kind of like the nature of college football, I think. But I know we kind of talked about this before we went live, the fact that I grew up in Southern California. So you coming from the East Coast, I would love to know like what's your favorite thing about living in LA?
Definitely the weather. That has to
Okay.
be the best. The
Yeah,
fact
because you
that
were you like upstate, like you said Syracuse, right?
yeah, so a lot of
Okay.
snow
Yeah.
there, and then, I mean, we go to all these Big Ten road games, and it's pouring at Purdue, it's pouring at Notre Dame. It never rains here, which
Yeah.
is awesome. So I like that part of it. I do have some family here, which is nice too, so that's a big part of it. Yeah, so the weather and just the friends, it's a lot of stuff that I think most people would say, but I'm fortunate to have a good situation here, and I think that's
Yeah.
probably the best part of
And probably food. You have like really
it.
good food.
Yeah, and I'm guilty sometimes of postmating stuff, and that's very easy to do here too. So
It's hilarious because I don't eat meat, but I always talk about how I will forever be an advocate for In-N-Out just because I grew up with In-N-Out, and I will die on that hill that In-N-Out is just amazing and wonderful and an experience that everyone should have at least some point in their life.
people say it's overrated. I'm with you 100%. I love their
Don't get
fast
it.
food burger, and I'm very simple. Like there are other times I'll go and get a lot of stuff on my burger, but like at In-N-Out, I just like to get cheese and ketchup in the burger and the bun, and that just really does it for me. So that's my order.
Yes, people really like to fight me on this about how it's overrated or their food's not that great or their fries are bland. And I'm just convinced they're not doing it right because if you are just like eating their fries with nothing, then I understand that. But the point and the beauty is like to build upon them and have animal fries and get all that delicious stuff. So obviously, people need the In-N-Out education before they go to In-N-Out to truly appreciate it for what it is. But that is something I always point to. I mean, we have them in Oregon and we have more opening up in Oregon, so it's going to be like crazy. But I remember a few years ago when I lived in Denver and the first one opened up, I'm pretty sure the wait was like 6 hours from start to
Wow.
finish to get through it In-N-Out, which is just it's insane for people who like live or have lived in California because I would go to In-N-Out sometimes and it would be dead, like no line at all. So it's fascinating how that the icon of it has kind of taken over across the country.
Yeah, it's like the new iPhone. People will wait in
Right.
line for anything that's new.
Exactly. I will never wait in line that long for food, but I get the experience. I hope everyone has it at some point. But yeah, that's great. I love that I love that you love the weather. I get it. It's great weather for sure. But it sounds like you're doing such a good job over there with all the content, especially the content I've seen. It has been really great stuff. So can you go ahead and tell people where they can find you?
Sure. First of all, thank you. That's very nice. So on X, I'm at C_Morrissette, and my last name has double R, double S, double T. So at the podcast we do, they call me Triple Double sometimes, which is a funny nickname. And USCfootball.com, you can find everything USC related. That's where we'll write all our stories and post all the podcasts and the video stuff. So I'd say those are the two main spots.
Awesome. That sounds great. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next Sunday to talk about week 9 of college football. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the Total Coverage Sports channel just to keep up with all the new content that we are creating. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you.